Hello listeners, welcome to episode 2 of Dalhas Talk. We're going to be continuing our conversation about resilience today in more depth. So there's a Harvard study that's been developed in relation to child development, children who've experienced trauma, children who've experienced a bit of difficulties in their life. And they've found that one of the key factors for children to develop resilience is to have at least one caregiver or parent who's a stable parent in their family. I want to know what you think about that. Do you think having a family member, or having a role model, or having a caregiver who's quite stable in the family influences the amount of resilience you can develop or build? I'm here with mental health nurse Ali today. And Ali, to put the question towards you, this Harvard study looks at how some children are able to develop resilience in the face of hardship and others are not. The study discusses how it's important for children to develop resilience from a younger age. In your professional experience, what do you think?
As a mental health nurse, I feel like resilience is something that can be built from childhood. The reason for that is one of the active ingredients of resilience is having supportive relationship, which comes from parents, which comes from adults or in the community, teachers. These are like positive relationships that help you, give you the support in developing resilience in difficult situations. But not always the case where some individuals might not get that supportive relationship. Or when you go to college, you got teachers that will help you. You know, they could help you build that kind of resilience by you discussing with them, talking with them, and then that's how it comes about. As a whole, resilience covers many areas in how it can be developed. So it's a lot got to do with protective factors in the social environment.
Children need some sort of positive stress, is what they call it, in childhood, because when you develop that positive stress not when you develop positive stress, but when you are exposed to positive stress from other people in children's lives, that's building the muscle of resilience. Some difficulties, some situations are actually good for you. So when it comes to trauma is quite significant in the sense that anyone who experiences an event or situation that they've not processed very well, or they've processed to a point but they're not able to understand the emotions that they're feeling during that sort of difficulty that they're experiencing. So the opposite of that is having someone or having a parent or caregiver, as the Harvard study is saying, who's able to model how to deal with stress, how to deal with difficulties in situations. What I can see from a psychological perspective is some sort of positive stress is really crucial to your development as an individual, as a professional now working in a setting where you're dealing with emotions and dealing with people who are finding it difficult to develop resilience. Now you can actually portray that and project that to people, whereby the experiences that they have and how they can reframe that. So reframing is one of the key things that help to develop resilience, which will come towards the end. What's your take on that?
When you talk about resilience, you can't do everything alone. It doesn't work like that. You need some form of guidance. You need someone to advise you. And all it takes is having a one-to-one with someone. Taking on these kind of situations, it gives you the chance to reflect as well. That also builds your resilience, because when you respond to it well, now when an experience like that happens again, you will respond to it even better. And you'll be able to balance it yourself, because you will think to yourself, okay, I've had some negative experience about this whole situation, but I've also had positive. You always try to make yourself feel better. That's the key to everything, regardless, because at the end of the day, you're not going to let that put your confidence down. That's what I believe, that how you respond and manage and compose yourself is a key thing in this area, and how the fact that you're able to overcome this whole situation, and the fact that you've believed in yourself and you're not going to let your self-esteem or your confidence go down just because of this situation. It all comes down to how you respond to it, to all of it all together.
You speak of something called redirecting the narrative. So when you're able to reflect on a certain experience, you're able to look at what went well, what went bad, what difficulties you experienced, what emotions you felt, right? So the key thing to developing resilience is how you redirect the narrative. You put the situation in a more positive light, and in doing that, you're able to recreate a self-image of yourself. So resilient people become aware of unexpected abilities as they rise to each challenge, right? Resilient people do not let significant life events affect them. And the way they don't let them affect them is naturally when you've lost someone, you're not going to be the same person again, right? However, you reshape yourself. The narrative is, what is this person going to want for me going forward? This person that I've lost, whether it's my father, whether it's my partner, they'll want me to continue living my life. You hear patients in services talk about these things as well. When they've lost a loved one, they talk about, okay, how am I going to continue with my life? My life's changed now because I've lost a loved one. However, going forward, this is the new version of me. Not completely the new version of me, but what it's trying to say is, you've lost someone. How do you come away from that? You have to move on for yourself. That's resilient. That's where a lot of people develop difficulties. That's where a lot of people develop a lot of emotion and trauma, and expressions of pain can be seen in that area. And once you are able to develop some sort or recognize that you have some control in your life, that's a great starting point for building that mental muscle of resilience, because that's where everyone needs to start. When things are out of your control, when things feel like you're overwhelmed and people feel there's so much that they can't get their head around, what does that show? That shows that in their mind they think, if certain situations are out of my control, what is in my control? What can I control that will give me that feeling of comfortability, that security, that empowerment? And reflect and think back to what is in my control at the moment. And one of the key things in your control at the moment is your emotions. One of the key things is, once we learn how to control our emotions to a certain situation, whether it's death, whether it's not achieving a job that you want to achieve, failing multiple interviews, or, failing an exam or a dissertation, is start to learn to control your emotions. Like, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to feel in a certain way about a certain situation that's difficult or uncomfortable. You're automatically giving yourself a building block to then build on these kind of situation.
You could develop that positive sense of feeling when you have things under control. And I think one of the biggest skills that contributes to resilience is having organizational skills and being structured in your life. And that's through many things. I can give you an example, like, as I work as a mental health nurse, and there's a patient diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Patient is very unwell at this stage. There's certain things that he has his belongings, and these are the only things that he has within his control. So when that's been taken away, patient's getting very anxious and stressful, agitated in his behavior. I then thought, okay, let me look for a way that will make the patient feel better. I then got his belongings, showed it to him. I didn't give it to him, but I showed it to him and showed him, look, these are your belongings. These are going to go there in a locker, and whatever belongings he is allowed to have will be given to him. And do you know what? That straight away calmed him down. It calmed the patient down. Once you have learned the technique of being structured and organized, you will get better at it, and you will become more and more satisfied with yourself. And so when it comes to more of another challenging event in your life, or a more challenging situation, you now know that you have this set of skills, and now you believe in yourself. But also at the same time, it builds you to be mentally strong in your mind.
That brings to mind something I read recently as well. It's someone called Dr. Ginsberg, and he's a child pediatrician. And he talks about that there's 7 areas of resilience, and I think you encapsulated all 7 of them in that example. So you need control, which is what we spoke about first when it comes to developing that muscle of resilience, right? And then that's when you have some sort of control, you're able to cope with the difficult situations that someone may face in their life. You develop the character in a way whereby when difficult situations came to you, you're able to navigate them in a way that you achieved good well-being, you felt good within yourself, and then you are able to support other people. And that's exemplified in your job as well, that you're able to support other people to develop that resilience. You're able to not give them therapy, but give them that understanding and teaching that some situations out of your control. A patient in a mental health unit is clearly going to be out of control, kind of be feeling like all of life is against him or her based on the situation that they're in. What you are able to do in that moment, and it's a teaching moment, is the fact that you were able to give him that control. You were able to show him where he had control in his life. And then by doing that, that's a recognition of character within you to then allow others to build their own resilience. And that's really, really great, right? And then by doing that, you are able to build a connection. So people who are struggling in their life and who feel like there's so much going on and they don't know where to start to overcome these things, think of connection. Think about the people that are able to support you in a way that you're able to relate to them, that you're able to think, okay, you know what, this person did it in such a way. This person was able to achieve his dream job even after like 10 failed interviews. Or this patient, like, he's been in this service for so many months or days, but yet he's now recovered and he's walked out like a changed person or changed individual. And that's connection. So we all need to find I talked about it in the previous episode, if you remember, in terms of relatability in a nutshell nutshell, in a psychological term, is connection. We all need connection on a human basic level. It's one of the 7 needs that we all have. And when you have a connection to someone who has already developed a way of doing things when they're in a difficult moment, automatically you'll want to develop that within yourself if you don't already have that, right? That's one aspect. Once you're able to find some sort of control and develop some sort of connection, and your character's been building, and you feel like you're coping with a certain situation, and then you have some sort of control over your situation, you're now confident. So you're talking to me from all your experiences, and you've reflected, and you've become a confident individual in the sense that you're able to understand what working that muscle of resilience means and how you can educate others or support others to do the same. And then you become better at it over time. And I think Dr. Ginsberg there encapsulates everything that we're talking about on a more everyday term, so people can relate. Is all these 7 areas or 7 elements are really crucial to developing resilience. And I'll add to that by saying as well, because people from different social classes or cultural backgrounds and different urban communities or communities that are not as affluent or opportunities, in those areas it's more difficult for people who are in traumatic situations, children in foster care, young adults in different services, in prison or in mental health services. I'm just giving examples of all people who may be in these kind of situations. But for those people, when you strip away all of the element of the fact that you're in that difficult situation, you start by what's in your control. Then you add to that by, how can I develop this, by looking at someone who's, a role model and developing that connection to them, to then be able to mirror that and implement that for our own self. And then we become better at it. And then we're able to build confidence in ourselves about that. And I think that's a really great example. What do you think? To be fair, not even what do you think, right? But what do you think generally in relation to how you've seen resilience develop in others? Now that I've told you this and I've given you a bit of the science behind it or the psychology behind it, what in others have you seen that's really stood out to you about this whole area of resilience?
If you look at in the mental health services, when a patient is well, what do patients do when they're well? They start to work on their personal hygiene. Start to work on looking after themselves. They start to know the routine for medication time, when to have the medication. They start to work on taking on responsibility of their own treatment. And you will see that the patient is starting to develop resilience after not only their mental health, but also their physical health. Like example, their personal hygiene, having a routine of having a shower in the morning, going for a walk in the morning, medication time, and then they eat breakfast and things like that, and they have a routine. And you will see that the patient is starting to develop the resilience. Not only patients, but also people, in normal general population. You see people who are really into their personal care. They want to look good. They're looking after and having a good diet. These are all things that makes you believe in yourself. So they go to the gym, they work on their fitness. In general, all of these things are kind of working towards really becoming resilient. Because what do you do? What does these things allow you to do? Number one, like I said before, you have a structure and you organize in your life. Number two, you believe in yourself. When you believe in yourself, it's a massive key. Yeah. That's why I say resilience, yeah, it's massive. It's massive. There's a lot of areas within resilience. And there's so many areas that you can look into, yeah. Because resilience is developed by doing so many things that come together. Like I mentioned, personal care. You want to look good, you want to look attractive, you want to look fresh, you want to work on your fitness, your physique, you want to be good at your job, you want to be these are the things that make you believe in yourself. So everything you do come across in your life, like all these difficulties and stressful times, you can believe in yourself and your capability because you have the strength for it. You are mentally strong for it as well. Whoever does build that kind of life, yeah, I think it's not easy for them to. It won't be very difficult for them to overcome stressful times. There will be times where, okay, it might be very stressful, but they just need that little bit of support from those that are close to them, isn't it? Otherwise, these are the things that all come together. Also, what makes you resilient is learning to enjoy your own company as well. You don't necessarily need to always keep chilling with friends. Learning to enjoy your own company, but also enjoying your time with friends. These are all things that come together that makes you more resilient. That's what I believe.
You mentioned belief, right? And I think you touched on it before, but I want to focus on it. You mentioned belief in relation to resilience. What do you mean by that?
Belief is massive. Personally, it's massive. I don't care how bad situation I am. Regardless, I'm going to overcome this. I'm going to believe in myself. I believe in my ability and my skills, yeah? It's very good the fact that you work on your set of skills that you have. You work on them qualities that you have in your qualities that you believe is your biggest strength. Work on these. These are your biggest advantage. And that's what makes you believe in yourself. Although there'll be times where not everything will work out for you. That's good for you, because you need sometimes a knockback, because that will make you even more stronger. These are things, if you look at it from that perspective, yeah, you believe in yourself, but it didn't come out the way you wanted it to be in some situations in your life, but you will learn from it and it will make you stronger. And that's what I'm saying, like, that's where belief comes into it. Like, whether things don't come out good for you, or things do come good for you, regardless, you believe in yourself. And that's why I say to all the young people out there, believe in your set of skills, and it's all based on how you've developed these throughout your whole life. And all these skills of understanding, it means many things in your life, in your area. Like I mentioned, all these other areas and key points that I mentioned, these are the things that will help you believe in yourself at the end. That's the main thing that you need to look into, is working on yourself physically and mentally.
Great stuff there. One thing I've learned, even just from talking to you, right, and this conversation, is there's research out there that talks about resilience over time and how that's developed. But one of the key things that I've noticed as well is this is something that research hasn't really touched on yet, that people who develop, and I'm going to go with the word spirituality, because people believe in religion, people believe in different things. But in terms of belief at its core, is if you're spiritual or if you're religious, let's just say, or you have a religious belief or you have a belief of something, then that develops resilience, because it helps you to think outside the box. So when you believe in something, or when you're spiritually connected to something, you're automatically then developing that muscle, because you're giving the meaning to a certain situation. You're giving it to something. In a religious perspective, you're giving it to a higher being, right? So when you're in a difficult situation, what do we say? We say, oh, you know what, this is in God's hands. This is what we think, in this situation, this is what this means. And I think that's really significant in relation to building resilience. And people might turn around and be like, oh, well, we're not religious, we're this. But that doesn't matter, because I think just believing in something or being spiritually connected, being aware that there's something outside your own control, is very, very significant, in the sense that some things are not in our control. But what do you make that situation mean, right? And that, I think, is a key point. And that's why belief, I think, encapsulates all these other areas of resilience, or it's found in some of these areas. I'd like to know what other people think at some point or the other, but in the sense that for me, and from what you're saying, that whole belief gives you that fuel in your engine and in that car to then drive down the road of life full of difficulties and all these other cars. If you think about the analogy of all the other cars being difficulties, how you drive in a straight line, how you weave or overtake or, stay in your lane, that all comes from the belief that you have within yourself, but also belief in certain situations and what you make them mean. And I think this is what we're all sometimes guilty of doing, is when a difficulty befalls on us, and we say that, why did this happen? We make it mean something about ourselves. Why did this happen to me? This shouldn't happen to me. I've had loads of things going on in life. Why is no one else? And that kind of talk and that kind of way of expressing is where people are not able to then build and develop themselves. And one of the key reasons that is practice self-talk, practice positivity. Don't worry, I'm coming to a close, but you've talked about self-talk a lot there, and you are able to constantly give yourself positive visualizations that I'm good at this. I've got a skill set. I've got experiences. I've seen people cope with certain situations. This is how I'm going to do it. I've built that confidence within myself, and that's key to developing resilience. Practice a lot of self-talk, positive reinforcement, positive self-talk. If you're feeling sad, think about ways that you're feeling happy, in the sense that what are things that are actually okay in your life or that make you feel happy, whether it's a loved one, whether it's a job, whether there's something there that's still giving you some sort of positive feeling. Focus on that when you're feeling quite negative about certain things. The key point as well is accept a situation when it happens. When something is really difficult, or when you feel like there's things that are going on in your life that are really, really out of your control, just accept it. Accept the fact that it's out of your control. Because when you start to accept, the key with acceptance is when you begin to think, okay, you know what, something was out of my control, it's fine, this is how I'm going to deal with it. And that's the key step, because you've then brought the control back by telling yourself, I'm going to deal with it in this way. I've lost a loved one, like that patient. I've lost a partner of 50 years. This is how I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to put myself into therapy. I'm going to send myself to a mental health service in his situation. But the example being is you take back the control. You don't let the event or you don't let the emotion overcome you or overpower you. That's key. One other thing as well is practice gratitude. And for those who are of a religious affiliation, that should be a non-negotiable anyway, truthfully be speaking, is you be grateful. In the Arabic language is shukr. You practice that gratitude daily. And the reason they do it, and even from a religious perspective, is it's not just because of the fact that, oh, you're meant to be grateful for the things that you have, but from psychology is telling you this as well. Practice gratitude. And I find that really amazing, because psychology is like a science, so to speak, but that's telling you practice the very thing that spirituality and religion is also telling you. And the reason that is because when we look inward and when we're able to actually be grateful for the things that are already present in our life, we're then able to think we have some things that are in our control. We are very lucky in some ways in compared to people who are in a worse situation. That automatically makes you feel a bit better. And that's positive self-talk, but in a different way. And I think there's way more nuances to this, which we'll cover at some point in different episodes as well. And especially with Ramadan, the religious month of fasting coming around the corner, that's something that I want to go into for that month, which is looking inward, inner reflection, what fasting means, and how resilience is built through fasting, how resilience is built through these avenues. So I think that's really, really interesting. And just generally speaking, we all have to start somewhere. So you have given a real good framework for people to, go out and think, this is how I can develop myself and develop the muscle of resilience is, practice self-care, develop healthy habits, provide some structure and routine into your life. And those are like good starting points. And these are things we'll continue to discuss going forward. We've talked about how resilience is developed. We've looked at how the Harvard study has evidenced that children who are faced with difficult situations, they manage to survive it. They manage to get through and show resilience through, some of the factors that we've discussed. Key thing with resilience as well, in terms of building resilience, is we need to look at the strengths that we already have in our character and in our personality, because those are the things that will help us when we are in difficult situations. So we focus on the strengths that we have. We're confident, if we feel like we can communicate really well. Those kind of traits and skills are what we can develop in our everyday life, so that when we are faced with difficult situations, those are the key traits that will help us become more resilient, will help us navigate through difficult situations, make everyday life meaningful as well. So do something that gives you a sense of accomplishment, gives you a sense of satisfaction, because that helps to build your identity. Once you build your identity, you're feeling more confident. And if we look at the 7 areas that we covered with Dr. Ginsberg, confidence was one area that was built in resilience as well. I'm going to leave you guys with one little story, because I think this whole topic that we uncovered stemmed from a children's study that was researched. And the story goes like this. It's a metaphor really about a hugging tree, and it talks about a little boy who grows up and he sees a tree that's grown alone on a cliff, and the tree experiences a lot of hardships, but the little boy gives it a lot of kindness. It helps the tree to grow, and then in turn that tree is able to provide shelter for others. It's achieve its purpose. And I know it's a childhood story. It's teaching our children from a young age that these kind of examples, when you build up yourself in a certain way, you're able to then enable others to benefit others. So you build yourself up in a way, then you can help your children mirror that same resilience, give that resilience and give that understanding and compassion to other people. See you on the next episode. The next episode we'll be covering a really interesting topic, British Pakistani women and how they develop through, the cultural lens. We'll touch on feminism, we'll touch on other aspects. So stay tuned, that'll be coming real soon as well.